Hello and welcome to Punnett Square practice with Mr. Brocklehurst. I'll be going through the Punnett Square practice question by question. At different points I'll ask you to pause and think about the question yourself before you proceed in the video and answer the question or get the question answered to you by me. So remember, the purpose of this is to get good at Punnett Squares on your own, to be able to answer and interpret them on your own, and so that you are equipped to deal with similar type questions on a formative coming up soon or a summative test happening in the more distant future. Let's begin with question number 1. If we read question number 1, you'll see that it starts out with the term a heterozygous plant. Heterozygous, what does that term mean? Now, if you recall from our textbook and our dictionaries that heterozygous is a vocab term for us, and we should know that heterozygous means that there is both a dominant allele and a recessive allele. So it should have a big letter and a small letter, or a capital letter and a lowercase letter. So we're talking about crossing this heterozygous plant with a pinched shaped pod as well, okay, or with a pinch shaped one, and that has a lowercase or small letter t, so that must be a recessive plant that has both recessive genes. So we talk about this heterozygous plant, and where would that appear in our Punnett square? Well, that happens to be the big small that we talked about before. Remember, heterozygous means one of each, dominant and recessive. Now, if we had a pinch-shaped pod, small letter t, if it's recessive in terms of what we see, that means its genotype has to have both small, small. So that's what we're seeing over here. So this would be the heterozygous, and this would be the recessive. Okay, how do we fill out a Punnett square? Take a minute and fill it out on your own. Take a guess if you need to. Compare it with people that sit close to you. I'll ask you to pause the video now, and when we come back, when you're done, we'll answer the question. So pause it now. Okay, and now we're back. So here we are, about to fill out the Punnett square. And to fill out a Punnett square, we have to take the letter from above that cell and the letter from the left of that cell and combine both of them here. Now there are two ways we can do this. We can do a big small, or you can do small big. Now, there is a convention in science that if it is heterozygous, that we always use the big letter first. So I'm going to actually delete the second of the two options to follow along with convention, which is big small to represent heterozygous. Okay. We're filling out this cell. We would once again use the letter from above and the letter to the left. And if we use both of those, we'll end up with small, small. Okay, if we continue to use the letter above and the letter to the left, we'll find that this cell is familiar, and so is this one. Okay, hopefully you have a matching set in your 1A as well, and if not, please make those corrections at this point. Alright, let's proceed. So as we scroll down, we see that there are more parts to question number 1. The second part is, what are the possible genotypes and phenotypes of the offspring? Now this involves some more vocabulary as well. Genotype, for instance, refers to the two-letter combination that we see in the offspring. So the offspring are the children again. And so if we look back in 1A, we'll see that these are the different genotypes that we have for the offspring. Okay, the letters above and the letters to the left were the genotypes for the parents, but the offspring are in the center. So the genotypes that we have are big small and small small. Okay, in fact, instead of a comma here, why don't we use a colon? That may work a little bit better. Let's continue. Phenotype. Phenotype is what we'd actually see. Now, you can't see microscopic little genes, but we can see is the pod of the plant. So we can talk about whether the pod is inflated or whether it's pinched. Now remember, inflated is the dominant trait and pinched is the recessive trait. So if we were to look at the big small, we have two genes here that are communicating different things. One is communicating that it should be inflated, the other one's communicating that it should be pinched. The one that is dominant will be the one that is quote-unquote listened to. So in this case, the one that is listened to is the big letter, T, which suggests that this one will be inflated. And if we look at the other option, the small, small, both genes are in agreement. They both communicate that the pod will grow up to be pinched, which is the recessive trait. Okay. Hopefully that there are no questions on part B and that makes sense to you as well. Okay. Let's continue on to letter C. What is the probability of the offspring will be pinched? Okay, so for probabilities, we always want to look at the Punnett square again. These are the offspring. So there are 4 possibilities. And for probability, the convention is to write the probability as a fraction. So what I'm going to do is count the number of them that are pinched. The number of them that are pinched are this one and that one. So there are 2 that are pinched out of 4 possibilities. So that's the way I would write the probability, is 2 out of 4. Now, you know, in math class, that's a no-no. You're not supposed to leave fractions that are not reduced. In science class, it's okay. In fact, in probabilities, it's generally all right to leave it as a non-reduced fraction because it communicates that you've taken a larger sample. However, 2 out of 4 is the preferred answer. We would also accept 1 out of 2, or we would accept a third possibility, which is a percentage that is equal to 1/2. 1/2 as a percent would be considered 50%. So all 3 of these are correct answers. My preferred version is this, is the 2 out of 4. Hopefully that makes sense to you. If you have any questions, pause it, go back, repeat the video, and start again. Okay, let's move on. Let's take a look at question number 2. In question number 2, we're talking about crossing a purple people eater that is heterozygous with a purple people eater that does not have horns. And in this case, no horns is the recessive trait. So I'm going to ask you to fill out the top and the side for these. Let's use the top as the heterozygous and the side as the no horns. And do that over the next minute. I'm going to ask you to pause the video now, and we'll come back in a minute. So go ahead and pause it now. Okay, welcome back. Okay, so as I said before, we're going to try to fill out the top as the heterozygous. Remember, heterozygous means that there's 1 dominant trait and 1 recessive. Now the next one was to cross it with a purple people eater that does not have horns. And remember, no horns is recessive, and the only way that you can end up with a recessive trait is if you have both of your alleles being recessive. So I'm going to put small, small to represent that they're both recessive there. Okay. Now take a minute again and fill out the rest of the Punnett square. I'll wait while you pause the video now. Okay, welcome back. Let's fill out the rest of the Punnett square. If we take 1 from above and 1 from the left, we should get something like, oops, looks like I forgot to center this. Let me fill this out first. And I'll center the first cell just so it matches up with the rest of them. Okay, any questions on 2A? You'll find that it should be very similar to 1A up above. All right, let's move on. Summarize the genotypes and phenotypes for this possible offspring. I'm going to ask you once again to try this on your own. Look at 1B for reference and pause it now. We'll come back in just a few seconds. Hey, welcome back. Here are the answers to letter B. I'd like us to take just one step further. If we were to also talk about the probabilities. Probabilities for genotypes big, small, and for small, small. You'll notice that in our Punnett square there are 2 out of the 4 for each. So I'm going to say that here. 2 out of 4 for each. And would that also translate to the same phenotypes? One horn also has a 2 out of 4 possibility, and so does no horns. In fact, let's put the word probability back here as well. Okay, good. Hopefully that answers any questions that you may have had on question number 2. When you're ready, please move down to question number 3, and I'd like you to just try this one completely on your own. So pause the video now, and when you come back, we'll go through it all at once. So pause the video now. I'll wait a few seconds. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so in question 3a, what is the trait genotype for a wrinkle-seeded plant? Now, wrinkle-seeded apparently is a small letter R representing it. So if it is wrinkle-seeded, which means it has a recessive trait, then it has to have both recessive alleles, small r. Small r. What is the trait genotype for a heterozygous plant? Remember, heterozygous means it always has one dominant, one recessive, and we always put the dominant before the recessive. The next one is, what is the phenotype for a heterozygous plant? Well, the heterozygous will always take the dominant trait. And the dominant trait here, apparently, is round-seeded, not wrinkled. So I'm going to type the word, oops, whoop, lost it there, round-seeded. That's its phenotype. Okay. Letter D. Make a Punnett square to represent the cross of the wrinkle-seeded plant with plant heterozygous for this trait. So this is going to get familiar once again. I'll put the heterozygous on top, the homozygous wrinkle-seeded plant on the side. This should be predictable to you by now. Oh, and there we go. Okay, let's move on. Let's take a look at question E. What are the probabilities of each genotype that results? Again, you've had some time to look over this. It's pretty similar, so I'm going to go through this very quickly. The genotype probabilities for RR would be 2 out of 4. And for, sorry, small. Oops, I should do that up here. Small would also be 2 out of 4. Phenotypes. I gotta remember, what are we talking about here? Wrinkle-seeded and round-seeded. Round-seeded is dominant, so round would be 2 out of 4, and wrinkled would also be 2 out of 4. Okay. Hopefully that solves that one. I'm going to pause the video now and give you a chance to look through number 4 and 5 and 6 on your own. Okay, so starting question number 4, if you haven't started yet, then please pause the video now before I give away the answer. And here we go with the answer. The first thing I would talk about in question number 4 is probably, what is the father's eye trait genotype? It talks about the father having red eyes, and we know that red is the recessive trait. So in order for the father to have red eyes, it's got to be small letters. It's the only way you end up recessive. Okay. So the next question is, what is the mother's eye trait? Now we know that she has black eyes, but that could be 2 possibilities. So I'm going to list them both right now, and we'll come back in a moment to discuss why only one of them is possible. Now let's try to fill out a Punnett square here. Let's start with the father on top. Okay, let's talk about the possibility of 2 big B's for mom on the side. Is it possible to produce children? Is it possible to produce children with that have red eyes? And you'll see here that all 4 children in this particular case have black eyes, because the heterozygous always follows the dominant allele, which is black. So this is not possible. Okay, so we must have gotten something wrong, and what we got wrong was the mother's eye trait. Big is not possible, or you can't possibly produce recessive children. So let's revise. What if we went big small? What would that change? What would change the bottom row in my particular example to this? And under this circumstance, you could see that there is a 2 out of 4 probability of any kid being born with red eyes. Now I know it says all 3 children have red eyes, which is not probable, but it is possible. Okay, because it's not like once this is used on the first kid, it's used up. No. This is like rolling the dice every time. It's possible to roll the same number every time. the same way it is to use this to end up with the same sort of phenotype every time that you do a Punnett square. So it's not like they get used up when one kid turns out that way. Alright? Alright, let's pause it again, read through number 5 and number 6, and we'll go through answers in just a moment. Pause it now. Okay, let's get started on question number 5. I have just a quick snipping tool with the empty Punnett square just to help me out as I'm thinking through question 5a. It talks about finding the probability of short-whiskered offspring if we have 2 long-whiskered seals. So 2 long-whiskered seals, one that is dominant and it's homozygous. So dominant and homozygous means that it has the same allele, and dominant means that they'd both be capital. So I'm going to come in here and just kind of put that at the top of my Punnett square. The other one is heterozygous, which means it has one big, one small. Okay, so if we finish this Punnett square, we get big, 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 small, and big, small. Remember, we always put the big before the small if it's heterozygous. Okay, so how many of these would have short whiskers? Now, you'll notice that in all of the examples here, they all have a big E in them, at least one, which means that they're all going to be dominant, which is the long whiskers. So I would say actually 0 of these out of 4 have short whiskers. So that's what I would type in for letter A here, 0 out of 4. Okay, and then we'll try to do something similar for the next one. The next one talks about, a crossing a homozygous long whisker, which is going to be big, big. Homozygous, remember, is the same long as the dominant one here, so we're going to go big, big. And another one that is short whiskered, which means is recessive, and that means it has to have both recessive traits. If we cross this, we'd end up with big, small, big, small, big, small, big, small. Now, if any of them, or if any of these outcomes here have a big letter to them, then they're going to take on the dominant trait, which is long whiskers. So again, we'd have 0 of them that are going to be recessive. None of these are recessive because they're all heterozygous. Okay, so if I move my snipping tool out of the way and I put 0 out of 4 here as well, oops, that's a weird looking 0. Let's try that again. That would be reflective of what we just talked about in the Punnett square. Alright, move on to number 6. Try it on your own. See if you can come up with the answer. I'll pause it now. Okay, welcome back. Question number 6 talks about 2 superstars. We have Wentworth Miller here and Rihanna. You can see that Wentworth has a very distinct widow's peak, whereas Rihanna has no widow's peak. It's very flat across her hairline there. Widow's peaks happen to be a dominant trait. Rihanna has a recessive trait. So as we look at this, the question is, what is Wentworth's genotype? Now, there are 2 possibilities here. One possibility is that he's a heterozygous individual, and the other possibility is that he is a homozygous individual, showing that he has 2 large or 2 big letters to represent the dominant trait that he has. Now, we know that Rihanna is small, small, because she has the dominant physical trait, which means she has to have both recessive alleles. So we can clearly identify that she small, small. Let's evaluate both possibilities for Wentworth. If we went with big, big, we'd end up with something like this for the Punnett squares. And if we went with a heterozygous one, we'd end up with big, small, 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 big, small, small, small. And we're trying to figure out which one of these 2 possibilities is it. Is it the homozygous Wentworth Miller, or is it the homozygous or the heterozygous Wentworth Miller? And if we know that some of the children ended up without widow's peaks, that would be this case. We know that some of them ended up without widow's peak. That means the only possibility for Wentworth Miller would be that he is heterozygous, and that would be the answer to letter to number 6. So I'm going to put in the heterozygous genotype for Wentworth. Hopefully that clarifies that. And if you have time, please take a look at question number 7. Try it on your own, and pause the video now. We'll come back in a few seconds. So pause the video now. Okay, welcome back. Here we are talking about question number 7. We're taking a look at Beyonce and Jay-Z, both of which clearly do not have a widow's peak, which means they both have the recessive trait. In order for them to have the recessive trait, both alleles must be lowercase. So I'm going to give them lowercase e's because they're easier to distinguish between the uppercase. If that is the case, all of their children should fall into one of these 4 categories. You can see they're all the same. All of them are no widow's peak people. So if they were to have children, is it possible that they have one with a widow's peak? I would say the answer is no. No. So write that down for number 7 if you haven't yet. Take a look at the Punnett square that I've drawn here if you're looking for an explanation. No widow's peaks. Okay. Good luck on number 8. Pause it now. Welcome back. We're taking a look at question number 8 with Zidane and Courtney. You can see that both of these individuals have very distinct widow's peaks. We don't know their genotype, so they might be heterozygous or they might have pure homozygous dominant traits. So the question is, could they have a child without a widow's peak? And I'm going to give away the answer first, and then I'll come back and explain it. The answer is yes. It is possible for 2 people with the dominant characteristic to create a child without it, or with the recessive trait. The way that they do that, there's really only one way. It's got to be done with 2 heterozygous parents. If either one of them is homozygous, then it can't happen. Because really what you're looking for here is this to occur in the lower corner. If that's the child that does not have a widow's peak, the rest of them, here, here, and here, will all have widow's peaks because they will have at least one dominant allele. But this is the only way that you can end up with a recessive child with 2 parents that are both dominant. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Please fill in the blank, or fill in or correct your question, or fill it in if you left it blank for whatever reason you got stuck. And good luck on your formative tomorrow. See you then. Bye.